Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
What's up, friends? Welcome to episode 33. In this one, I've got a very special guest and type of episode because I have brought somebody in who is not in the web design industry. In fact, my guest, Ryan McClure, is actually a realtor. He, and side note, has been a friend of mine since, I think like early middle school we've known each other. And we had a talk recently, and he brought a point up that I think is super, super valuable for any entrepreneur, but particularly for you guys as fellow web designers. And that's how to get past what we're dubbing your breaking point. And this is something that you are going to experience if you haven't already. And it's the point where you start your business, you're cruising along, you're trying hard, and you get to this point where you're like, I don't know if I can continue on. Maybe it's because you're not making enough money to support or sustain yourself right then. Maybe it's you're finding yourself just super stressed out with trying to start, learn, build, and grow your business. There's a variety of things that can happen. And you are, if you have not already experienced this, you're going to get to a point as an entrepreneur where you're going to come to a crossroads, and you can either keep on going and push through what we're calling this breaking point, or you can give up and you can go back to your corporate job or whatever you're doing. And I wanted to do this episode for a variety of reasons, but mainly to help you get past your breaking point. I have experienced several type of breaking points in my career, which I do talk about in the episode. And Ryan, as you'll find out, had a breaking point that he really had to push through when he had a family. He was newly married, he had a baby girl, and he got to a crossroads, and he had to learn a lot about himself to get past that breaking point. And so it's something I wanted to share with you because we talked about we kind of had a side conversation because he's starting a membership and doing some courses himself. So he wanted to ask me about how I did that. And he talked about this point, and it just resonated with me. And I was thinking about it ever since. And I was like, dude, I got to get you onto the podcast and we got to talk about this to help my fellow web designers. So I'm really excited for you to hear this and to see how it helps you, particularly for those of you who are early in your journey, who maybe haven't yet hit your breaking point. But again, as entrepreneurs, it's a roller coaster. There's a lot of highs, but there's a lot of lows, and I want to help you get past that. Now, before we dive into this episode, this one is brought to you by my web design business course. As you'll hear through this episode, there's one common question that I see in my Divi Web Designers Facebook group and that I get and that I hear all the time, and you can probably already guess what it is. The question is, how do I get clients? That is the biggest question, but newsflash for you. Here is a really important note. Getting clients is actually not the first step in the success of your business. There's a lot that needs to come before that, and the majority of it is the mentality, your mindset, and a lot of areas of personal growth and professional growth before you really start converting clients. Now, in my course, I do show you how to get clients very early in your journey, but it's not the first lesson in the course. I start off with the most important things that I learned through my journey. That way, when I started getting clients, I actually got clients, did a good job, and then it spawned the referral train, which brought me more clients over and over and over. Because here's another important point I want to make before we dive in. You can market all you want. You can get yourself in front of a lot of different people. That's much easier to do, but the biggest point is converting them. You need to convert those people into actual clients, and more importantly, you need to be able to feed that relationship and do a really good job. And I show you how to do that in my business course from start to finish. So that's available for you in the link below. If you really want to start your business or take it to the next level, I would love to help guide you. And make sure you listen to this whole talk all the way through, guys. Ryan was very transparent about his struggles, his breaking points, and what he had to do to get past that because he left a cushy, safe, stable corporate job to do this. And he's killing it in the world of real estate. And we had a great talk that just got me fired up and pumped up. And I can't wait to see how it helps you as well. So without further ado, enjoy my talk with my old buddy, Ryan McClure, on getting past your breaking point. Ryan, welcome to the show, man. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Josh. I'm really excited to be here. I know that the topic today is very important for people that I'm trying to mentor and the message that I want to share, because I feel like every single entrepreneur has to go through this journey that we're going to talk about.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, man. I was going to say that exact same thing. You know, you're a realtor, but I've been very open with this podcast about having people from different industries, as long as we're having conversations about topics that apply to my audience as well, because you just said it. We might be in different industries, but at the heart of it, we are entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs go through one heck of a roller coaster ride in life. A lot of highs, a lot of lows. And we had a conversation a couple weeks ago, and you talked kind of nonchalantly about getting past your breaking point. And then as I thought more about our conversation, I was like, man, that is such a good point. That's not really something I've talked about myself or I've talked about with other entrepreneurs. So yeah, I wanted to have you on just to talk about that, because you had a really, really interesting note afterwards. You kind of sent me these 8 tips that helped you. And that's what we're going to do. We'll go into each one of these 8 tips. Before we dive into that, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, Ryan, who you are, what you do, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about your breaking point in that story.
Okay. I think the most relevant information for everyone to know about me right now is that I spent 7 years in the corporate world. I worked 7 years for Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works, and I was working 60 to 75 hours a week, every single week. And at the end of the year, I always got the exceeds raise. But when I sat down and did the math, I was working 20 to 25 hours a week more than a lot of my peers to try to get that exceeds raise. And when I did the math, it only equated to about $2,000 to $5,000 of a raise every year. So when I did the math, it was really that I was making $3.80 an hour for the extra 20 to 25 hours a week that I was putting in.
Wow. What is the exceeds raise for folks who don't know, including myself? I'm not familiar with that term.
Yes. So every year you're going to have a year-end review, and you're either going to get a meets. This is all Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works, their headquarters, okay, how they do things. But you're going to get either a does not meets, a meets, or an exceeds raise. Okay. So does not meets means no raise. Meets raise means you're doing everything you're supposed to do. You're getting the standard raise. And then exceeds raise is, hey, you're killing it. You're doing great. Which really means you're putting in 25 extra hours a week, and we're going to pay you an extra $3.80 an hour more.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you did that, and what? Did you get to a point where you were like, I've had enough, and you wanted to join the Wild West of freelance? What did that look like for you, man?
Yes. So I started thinking, man, if you're always building someone's empire, am I building my empire, or am I building the person I work for's empire? That's what it comes down to, right? So I was building Les Wexner's empire, and he's a great guy. I'm happy to work for him. I learned some great traits, but at the end of the day, I wasn't building my own empire. I was going to work and getting paid an hourly amount, and that was it. So I decided that I want to build my own empire, which, as you know, puts you into the realm of entrepreneurship. So I struck out. Now, I particularly went into real estate because that's always been my passion. I've always loved doing it. I've helped my parents do rentals and flip properties ever since I was just a little 5-year-old. I'd be crawling through crawl spaces, looking for cracks in the foundation, stripping paint off of walls. So I've always had a passion for it. So I was like, I'm going to do that. And when I started, I went 3 months without making a single penny. 3 months. But I was also paying thousands of dollars every month in marketing to jumpstart my business. I had just gotten married. I just had a little girl. So now the fear started to set in. I wasn't making any money. I was spending money. And I didn't know that I was going to be able to put food on the table for my kids. And I sure as heck wasn't going to be able to make the mortgage payment. So fear and anxiety started to take over my life.
Gotcha. And what year was that? When did you branch off into the entrepreneurial world, Ryan?
So that was 2017.
Okay. So yeah, I was going to say, I didn't think it was, you're only a few years into your journey, which is amazing.
Yes.
So yeah, you went into it, and this is one of the things that I think a lot of people, this is what kills things right away, is because when they start, whether it's real estate or whether it's web design or any sort of industry, the first few months can be very difficult because often it's not super profitable right out of the gate. Now, there are ways. I mean, real estate is a whole different market. It's easier. I honestly think it's easier to make better money quicker in web design,
Yes.
but success is not going to happen overnight. It doesn't matter what industry it is. So that's the first big point, which you hit on, was that fear and anxiety that really almost paralyzed you and almost, put everything to a halt. Question number one, as we're talking about this first point, how did you get past that? Like, what steps did you take to get past that first step, man?
Yeah. So let me recap the last 3 years really quickly. So I went from zero sales, and now over the last 365 days, my team and I have closed $18 million in real estate. So what I decided was, when I was going through that dark time in my life, that I need to have a pathway for people that are also going through that dark time in their life, for entrepreneurs, because it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're going to go through this journey, right? I'm going to call it the hero's journey, right? They're going through a tough time, and then you either have the choice to give up, to wave the white flag, or to go back to what's safe, that salaried position you used to have, the part-time server position. And that's the fork in the road that I think we really need to talk about today, which is exactly what you were hinting at. But I started paying for thousands of dollars of coaching, and that's what I'm about, is trying to make that recipe for entrepreneurs and people that are going through that dark time in their life. What's the recipe out? What's the way to success? And that's what I really want to chat about. But you're exactly right. I think the number one thing, I made a little list here, is what causes fear and anxiety, because that's what really paralyzes entrepreneurs. And that's what paralyzed me, is I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get out of the situation that I was in. And what I found is the number one way to get out of that is to identify a clear path. So clarity, right? A clear path. What do I need to do? What actions do I need to take? And look off of a proven success, right? So proven success model. So if I was going into your industry, that's what I love about joshhall.co is, man, there's so much free material, but also there's great courses, right? So, hey, here's free material, allows me to dabble in there, allows me to kind of help me with the things that I need, but also there's in-depth courses that really gets me going. It allows me to exceed my own expectations and charts that pathway towards success.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Honestly, I didn't really think about it like that, but to that first point, having a proven step-by-step action plan or some light at the end of the tunnel, that is absolutely what my courses are about, because I've been there. Like, I understand that fear and anxiety that is often paralyzing, and there is a breaking point for a lot of people, and I had to get past those things. Now, for me, I've had a few breaking points, which I'll be happy to touch on. Luckily, I didn't have those while I had a family. So my first one was, I started my business in 2010, and the beginning of 2012, I had like 0 jobs on the table. I had been doing a pretty good job getting started, doing part-time freelance. I was taking community college classes. And then I got to a point where I was like, crap, I've got like no business coming in right now. And I had just recently made the push to doing it full time. But my dad, my dad, he was like, just hang in there. You can do anything you want. And that little line right there kind of helped me just hang in there a little bit longer. And then I got my next job. And then I got my next job. And then I got my next job. And I have, knock on wood, fortunate, I've never been in a position since then where I have not had a very long to-do list to keep up with. And that's a great place to be in. Yes. So that was kind of my first breaking point. But maybe we can talk about this now or later on. I have had semi-breaking points after that as well, where the money coming in was not as much as the previous month, and I've got mortgage to pay for, and now it's a whole different ballgame. Luckily, I'm at a different place professionally now, but years ago, I did have to do a couple late mortgage payments because I just didn't have the money to pay that month. But the next month was like a flood, so I learned more about budgeting and finances. So those are a couple of my breaking points, but I say that to say, I feel pretty fortunate that I didn't have as many responsibilities in those first couple big breaking points. But to your point, you started your business when you were newly married and you had a little girl. And yeah, that's a whole different spot to be in. Now, would you say the way you got past that was like, we still haven't touched on how you started making money. Was it the coaching that helped you get clients and get past that? What helped you get past the fear and anxiety? Point number one here.
I think that there's a few things. Number one, you have to commit to continually improving yourself, right? Because it gives you confidence in what you're doing. So I set aside time every day to do self-education, and it gave me confidence to be able to chat with people. And then I worked on my mindset, and my mindset made a huge difference, because when I convinced myself in my own mind that I was the best option for my client, I didn't come across as a salesman anymore to people. I could actually tell that when they were chatting with me, they wanted to work with me because they could see that I was the best option for them because of my passion. And I had convinced myself in my own mind that if I don't serve these people and win them over as my client, then I am doing them a disservice, right? And I think that's what's so important for entrepreneurs, is they have to win themselves over in their own mind that my product is the best for these individuals. And if I don't get it to them, if I don't get them to pay the money to purchase this product or whatever it is, that I'm doing them a disservice.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's funny because probably the number one question that I see in my Divi Facebook group and everywhere else online and that people ask me is, how do I get clients? That is the biggest question. How do I get clients? How do I get clients? And I don't like to start there. In my business course, that's like the middle of the course, because there's so much that needs to precede that, just like you're talking about. And it really does start with mindset. You need to be self-educating. You need to have confidence in your services and what you provide, like you're talking about. Now, you don't have to be an expert, or you don't have, like, for me, when I got started, I knew there was better designers, better coders and everything. But what I did have on people, other web designers, is that I cared way more than your average web design agency or your average freelance designer. And I made that very clear with my clients. I was like, you know what? If there's something I'm not sure about, I'll figure it out, or I'll talk with somebody and we'll get it worked out. Like, they could really sense, and this is a really important point I want to make for not only my web design audience, but every entrepreneur. And it goes back to there's a quote that basically goes something like this. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is really the first step to getting clients. You don't have to be an expert and know everything about your field. You just have to really care. And if the client feels that, you're going to land a client. When you land one client, you can land two clients. You land two clients, you can land 5, then you can land 10. So it really all starts with that. So I'm glad that you kind of made that point, because I think that it sounds like that was probably the first step, right, towards getting past, your breaking point in the early days. Is that safe to say?
I think it's one of the biggest ones. For me, things hit kind of at the same time, where I just started, doing a whole bunch of things based off of coaching, based off of continual self-education, based off of massive action. Right? Based off of massive action, I could tell that I was taking blank steps to serve my clients where other people weren't. So it kind of came at the same time through massive action and through mindset and through continual education. So it kind of came together as a package.
So do you feel like, you invested thousands of dollars in marketing? Lesson learned, would you go back and invest in self-education before marketing?
Yes, I would. But at the same time, it allowed me to fail at a faster rate. Okay. So it depends on you as an entrepreneur, right? You need to evaluate yourself. Am I okay with risking more financially to get more leads quickly to fail at a faster rate? Because I truly believe that the biggest failures, the people that have failed the most in life, are deemed the most successful by people, by society. And when I say that, I mean, people don't realize it, but the people up on the stage, the people closing $18 million a year in business, those are the people who have failed the most, but people don't see that, right? So it depends on how fast do you want to fail. that kind of help you make that decision on how much money you want to spend on marketing.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's true. And that's one thing that most academic types are not going to be comfortable with. And that's probably their breaking point, is because what happens when you're programmed in school, what happens is you're terrified of failing because you get an F. Mm-hmm. And look, I'll be completely honest, and you probably know this. I was a B/C student. And I was not worried about getting straight A's and a perfect test, which is probably why I'm very akin to being an entrepreneur. Like, I have absolutely failed a million times over. You're totally right. I do talk about those failures. I don't broadcast them, per se. But you're right. Like, most people see me as successful, and then I had a perfect path and my business grew. Well, yeah, but that's because I failed all the time. And I'm using all of these hard lessons learned as content of like, here's what you don't want to do. And I'm trying to help people avoid some of the things that I went through. Because my hairline was a little thicker back before I made all these failures, So that's a great point, man. And I think it's really huge. And I've talked about this a couple times in the podcast before, but I think one thing that's really valuable is figuring out what your breaking point is. Like, if the worst case scenario would happen, are you okay with that? So, it's different for everybody. Like, for me, I was all right with having to be late on a couple mortgage payments a few years ago. I was all right with that. Worst case scenario, credit score gets dinged a couple points. I can live with that. It's fine. I'm never going to be homeless on the streets. And I'm sure that was a point for you too. I mean, you have a good, solid family. Chances of you and your family being on the streets, it's not going to happen. Worst case scenario, what? You might have to move in with your parents for a little bit or something like that. Do you feel like that was a helpful point for you, getting past that breaking point?
Yeah, I think that I did an exercise that really helped. I'll try to be quick with it. But basically, I wrote down the number 1, 2, and 3 biggest fears. What's worst case scenario? Absolute worst case scenario. And I literally lived them, right? So I brought myself mentally to that point. I lose my house. I have to go back and work as a part-time server at a restaurant just to put food on the table for my family. But I always have a family member that I can move in with. So I addressed the biggest fears. And at the end of the day, it wasn't that bad. So the real only way you could fail is if I didn't take the steps to continue being an entrepreneur, because I couldn't truly realize if I could be really successful in the business adventure that I was taking on. So the real risk was actually not taking action and not continuing down the path that I had started. That was the real risk if I didn't do that.
Gotcha. That's interesting that you wrote those down. And like you said, you lived those. You were going through that. But you mentioned the term massive action, which it sounds like, from what I'm gathering, is instead of being paralyzed by fear and just quitting, you kept on acting. You persevered through that. You kept on growing, self-development, those type of things, until it started to turn a corner for you. Is that fair in saying that you persevered through that, and then one client at a time, one job at a time, you started making more money, and then a couple years later, you have a team and you're doing 18 million of sale? I mean, it's just crazy. So that's a really, really good point. It sounds like that's what, really helped you through that fear and anxiety, through that breaking point, was just keeping on going.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. The first year, it's interesting because I went 3 months, as you already know, without making any money. But by the end of that first year, I had cleared $115,000 that year. So as you know, that's 9 months that happened in, where I started making money and ended up making a good amount of money. But I will tell you that the bulk of that money came in the last 3 months of the year. Okay. Because the culmination of all the things that we're talking about had really started to click. I knew now how to win over clients with my mindset, and that I was doing them a disservice if I didn't secure them as a client. And all those things started coming together, so that I think the last 3 months of the year is when I had some big months, like $30,000 a month. And then all of a sudden I was like, what just happened? As an entrepreneur, when you first hit that, like a $60,000 a month, you're like, that's what I made as a salary a few years ago. How did that happen? As a full-time salaried position at Victoria's Secret, and then it opens the door. It says, well, then anything's possible. Anything is possible.
You know what, man? That's a great point. One of my students who just went full time, shout out Christian, he let me know that his second month out of his job during the crisis, by the way, during this pandemic crisis going on, he is making 6x doing freelance what he was in his corporate position. But here's the trick. He has done the mindset stuff, the planning, the preparing, and everything we've talked about before he went officially full time, which is invaluable. So great point. And that's really interesting that your most profitable months and the majority of that income came in those last 3 months. So it was like 3 months of fear and anxiety and terror, 6 months of gradual growth, learning and putting things into play, and then 3 months of profitability. And then it grows from there. And I think that's probably an average yearly path, a good path of somebody who sticks with it. You're going to have a few months of uncertainty. There's probably going to be some low points, but if you can get past that, just get one job at a time, keep on learning, keep on leveling up just in self-development. And, before really worrying about, because here's the other point to this before we move on to the next one. I found this to be really true in web design, and I'm sure you've seen it in the world of realtors as well. So many people are worried about getting their next client, getting the next client. But if you overlook how to convert those clients, what's the use? Like, you can market all you want, but if you can't actually convert clients, you're wasting money. And you're gonna get those failures. There's value in that, but it's much more important to feel good about closing a higher amount of clients percentage wise than just keep on churning through marketing dollars. So that's a big point, man. So so great. That's great. Number one, the fear and anxiety. The way you described it in the message to me was it was a lack of clarity and an absence of a proven step action plan. And I think that's great. Now, number two, you talked about giving before you get. Why don't you talk about that and just kind of explain how that helped? And did you feel this early on? Did you learn this later? What did that look like?
So for some reason, I don't know why, but society tells us that we should get something before we give something, or worst case scenario is that we give something and we get something immediately back. So for example, if I go work an hour as a server at a bar, then I would get an immediate wage for that hour that I spent. When you become an entrepreneur, you have to eliminate that mindset, in my opinion. In order to be successful or to be successful at a high level, you have to forget that mentality, and you have to learn and make peace with that you have to give before you get, and you might not get anything even though you gave. If you can make peace with that, you will succeed at a much faster pace, and you will mentally be able to continue staying positive because you're not expecting something every time you give something. All right. So another great example, and I'll be honest with you, Josh, I think this is one of the huge reasons that you have become so successful is that when I go and look at your website, you give before you get, right? So you want to give to your students and make sure, hey, I'm over delivering on value. And then at the end of the day, your clientele, your clients, your customers, they want to give back to you. They want to say thank you. So they're happy to exchange funds for the services that you've rendered. And I think that's what's really important for me is that, again, in the tail end of my first year, the giving before getting was mentally okay with me personally. I finally came to grasp that concept that I would need to give before I can get, and I should never expect anything in return.
Now, what did that look like practically for you? What did the giving look like? Was it giving information to your prospects and your clients? What did the giving aspect of all that look like for you?
Sure. So for real estate agents, we do a lot of showings. We do a lot of education for first-time home buyers. Okay. We do a lot of going over finances as far as credit and debt-to-income ratios, and giving things up front, knowing that we might not close. And when we close on a property, that's the only way that we get paid. So that's one of the things that I had to become okay with. So another example is different. I encourage my agents on my team to do different things when they meet a client for the first time. It might be as simple as bringing cold beverages with them. It might be as simple as, if you know you're meeting a elderly female, go get flowers from Kroger's.
Mm.
If you, Josh, sent me a referral, I'm going to handwrite a note and I'm going to send you a thank you note with a gift card in there. And all this is happening before I get paid. I don't get paid anything on all the things that I just named to you. Instead, I'm just hoping that by doing good, by helping other people, and by thanking people for keeping my business in mind, good things will happen and people will continue to refer people to me. And that's what has happened. Give before you get.
That's a great practical example. And web designers can do this as well when it comes to referrals. Absolutely. Like if somebody refers a client, make sure you reach back out to them, whether it is what you just mentioned, maybe a gift card. I've done that before with like an Amazon gift card. I'll just say like, hey, really appreciate the referral. It was a great lead. Here's $50 to Amazon. That has worked out really well. Or even just thankful for people who have invested in me as far as their time. A lot of times if somebody was willing to take a call for an hour with the questions I had, I would often just send them an Amazon card, just thanking them. And that kind of thing makes a big difference. Yeah, the give before you get. And this can be really, really impactful and applied to the step before you get a client. And you can apply this, Ryan, to your business, as you already know and you're already doing, but also for web designers. One way you can apply this is to give out free information, whether it's an ebook, a webinar, if it's like live in-person trainings and workshops. I've done those before, and those were all events that preceded actually getting a client. So again, going back to the question, how do I get clients? Well, if you start giving and you start providing a bunch of value with, things you don't have to be an expert, just share what you know. It's amazing how much you know when you start writing out, what you've learned. Even if you're new in your career, I challenge this to all my students. It's like, even if you're 6 months to a year in your career, you may feel like a baby in the web space. And yeah, you kind of are, but you know quite a bit already that you've learned. So I say that to say this idea that number 2, this idea of giving before you get, it's huge. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. But before you quote unquote get a client, yeah, if you give first and empower them and give them some information, it's going to help them. It's also going to make you look like an authority, like an expert. Yep. That's one of the biggest things too. And to your point, man, yeah, my endeavor at joshhall.co, it's 95% of my content is free. And yeah, at first, I really didn't make too much money at it. But in all fairness, I didn't really sell anything. I had like a couple $9 layouts. So of course, I'm not going to make a living doing that. But I have absolutely seen this point pay off for me tenfold, because now this endeavor is less than 2.5 years old for me. And now my course sales are way, way exceeding what I do with my web design business. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Like now it's paying off. I've gave and gave and gave.
Based off of that concept. Exactly.
Yeah. Based off of giving before you get. Yep. So number 2, that's great, man. Really
quickly, let's go over what you just said. Is you don't have to be an expert in the entire field, right? You can be an expert at one little piece. So even if you're a new person in the space, if you do a whole bunch of research on one specific item, you are automatically the subject expert for that item. So it allows you, even as a new to the space person, to be an expert at something, and you can give that information away. So that's just a quick way to say it.
That's a great point, man. Yeah, and I think that's where, I'm sure you feel this in your industry as well, but for web designers, there's just so much to learn. Like there's so many areas of web design. It can be very daunting, but like you just said, you don't have to be an expert on every area. If SEO is not your thing, that's all right. Don't focus on that. Focus on the design aspect or content, whatever you're interested in or whatever you know quite a bit about. So great point, man. And then next, I think this is what is one of the most important points that you talked about, and that's how to be intentional. And the way you put it was having like a laser-like focus, which I think is huge. And this, look, everyone's ADD, so it's harder than ever, particularly for web designers who are doing so many things at once. But having some semblance of focus and intentionality is really important for any amount of success, because you can't have success if you're dabbling and you're going from this to this to this to this. So what did that look like for you? I guess let me reword it. how did focus help you really kind of stay on track and then, build your business?
I was doing too many things. That's what it comes down to. I was doing too many things, okay? Now, I don't want to say just business things. Let me give you some examples. I was spending too much time on YouTube. I just get sucked into these videos. I waste time on YouTube. Some of my friends love TV series, Walking Dead. Some people love video games. If those things are a distraction and your number one goal is to get your business off the ground, you have to learn to eliminate those things and do the things that are most important, or you have to learn to prioritize your number one needle movers, the things that are going to move your business the fastest, before you're allowed to do anything else that day. Okay? So for example, for me, if I need to make 15 cold calls because I have found that is the best way to generate business, let's pretend, then I'm not allowed to do anything else the rest of the day until I have done those 15 cold calls. It goes back to the 80-20 rule, that 80% of your results are from 20% of your efforts. Mm-hmm. So if you focus on those things first and you prioritize those things first during the day, you're not allowed to do anything else until you've done those things. You become laser focused because you're doing the things you have to do to stay on track.
Interesting point. That's good. And so one thing with focus I've found is you hit a word, you touched on a word there, which was priority. And I think that's really what's at the core of focus, is being intentional about what is the most important. So you're talking about time management and scheduling your day. I totally agree with all that. This is why usually I will try to get like the things I either have to get done or really want to get done first. So when I do a tutorial or a video, I'll often do that in the morning. And then the afternoon is for reactionary work or stuff that I could work on. I don't necessarily have to work on right now. Those are the kind of things I save for the afternoon. But to your point, it's the priority. What is going to move my business forward? You said a term that's like move the needle. I would just say, whatever moves your business forward or help grows it. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that, need to be done. And the cool thing is there are things that you don't want to do that you have to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But a lot of these things are things that are cool, that really fire you up. And I think it's really important too, to make those a priority. And, you don't have to you don't want to not enjoy your day as an entrepreneur. That's one of the big things. You don't want to wake up like, oh, I got so much stuff I have to do. That's a dangerous position to be in. You're going to have that regardless. But I found that a lot of times with that idea in mind of the tasks that you have to do, a lot of times they don't take that long. I'm sure you've done this just like everyone else, where you've got like an email you got to get back to or something you got to address. And you're like, I don't want to do this today. I'm going to save it for tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, you're like, let me just save it for the next day. And then like I've done that to where I put a task off. And by the time I get to it, it only took like 10 minutes. I'm like, why didn't I just freaking do this?
Why were you dreading it, right? Why was I dreading this so much? It only took a few minutes and it wasn't that bad.
And how much mental strain did it cause you? Or so that's just a little side lesson right there. And that goes back into being intentional and being focused on like what you need to do and what's going to build your business. Just do it. Get it out of the way. Do it. That's huge, man. And I mean, I have a pretty... I've created a lifestyle to where I'm pretty lax as far as sometimes I'll save some things for later in the day if I want to, if it's nice out and I want to go out for a walk with my family, or maybe we want to get breakfast instead of starting exactly at 9. I'll do those kind of things. But the idea of still being focused on the most important tasks, that's there. I'm going to get that done regardless. So that's huge. I think that's and practically, before we move on to the next point, having a priority on the most profitable tasks, that's one of the most important things too. For me, a couple years ago, I was doing print work, graphic design work, and all these secondary services that I looked at my numbers and I was like, you know what? I'm spending just as much time on all these services that, they can kind of help grow my business, but I'm making probably like $20 an hour, where these services over here are making me like $100 an hour or $150. That's what I need to be investing my time in. So that's another thing. You get to a point where you've got to look at your services and what you do, like you talked about, and figure out what's worth it. What's a priority, what's making you money. And also I think what you enjoy. There's a lot of things that people do that, like, if it's not giving you life, then don't do it. Especially if you're at a point where your business is growing. You may have to do some of those things at the start, but once you get to that point where you can start to do what you want to do, that's what you got to do.
Absolutely.
And then number 4, you talked about having a positive attitude. And I'm sure this was not easy to do when you're 3 months in and you're spending thousands of dollars and you're not making barely anything, and you've got a wife to support, cute little girl who is adorable to support. Like, talk about the attitude. Like, did you feel like your self-growth, your personal growth, do you think that helped your attitude to push you through that? What did that look like?
I think that I'm going to wrap number 4 and number 5, if that's okay with you, together, which is positive attitude and committing to continual improvement and being okay with change. So number 1, positive attitude. Your vibe attracts your tribe.
Oh, I love that
right?
quote.
So that is so true. If you want to be around negative people, just be negative, right? You'll attract negativity. But if you're an entrepreneur, you have to surround yourself with positivity. And because there's so much change that will constantly be happening, your positive attitude will help you with the continual improvement and help you with change. And you'll accept it with a smile on your face. And oh, by the way, you're attracting other positive people right now. So you just are now surrounded by positivity instead of negativity. And there might be tough decisions that you have to make in your life, that you have to distance yourself from negativity. I had to distance myself from a few individuals. I had to distance myself from a few family members who would continually put me down as far as the business. Why are you even doing that? You can't do that. You're not going to succeed. So I had to distance myself, unfortunately. But that's when I started making more growth. I mean, right now, we're having a conversation because you can tell that I'm a positive individual. I can tell that you're a positive individual, or else you probably wouldn't want to have this conversation with me, right?
That's, my rule for the podcast is no negative Nancy's. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because it is a couple things you hit on there to put number 4 and 5 together, having a positive attitude and continuing improvement. It is really important to surround yourself with positive people, hopeful people, and you just don't get that often with family and friends. Like, I really, like, a lot of the friends that you and I went to high school with, and so I just don't keep in touch with anyone because they're still doing the same things that we were doing in high school. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm just at a different place in life. It's not that I'm better than them or I think less of them. I'm not like, I want to build businesses and help people. Like, most people are not wired like that. They're just working a job they hate and they're living for the weekend and whatever people do around, like that's very common. And then for family, I'm sure you've seen this as well. I feel like a lot of family members don't intentionally bring you down. It's like unintentionally. And it's probably due to like a good place in their heart. Like, they want you to succeed. They want you to be safe, and
let's lower your expectations a little bit so that you can succeed.
Keep in mind too, for everyone listening, when you're an entrepreneur, your family and your friends are probably not going to be entrepreneurs. So number 1, they're not going to understand. They're probably not going to understand the industry or the highs and lows that come with it. They also are not going to understand the potential, which is why, like, when you get to this point, it's like, whoa, they're so surprised that you made it. Well, it's like, yeah, but I freaking worked my ass off to get here, and we've had to go through a lot of things. And I think what I found is that a lot of times, whether it's immediate family or family that's outside, they don't know, and they care about you, they're worried about you, but little comments can really bring you down. And I want to make that point because you're going to experience that as an entrepreneur. So what your Aunt Lucy is going to tell you, are you sure that's a smart move? Like, can you save for retirement? Or what happens if you don't get any clients one day? And she may not think anything about it. She just voiced her opinion. But the next morning you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, what if I don't get any clients one day? And then the fear sets in, going back to point number 1, and then that can spiral out of control. So those are all things that I've dealt with. And I've had to realize, you know what? Family, friends, whoever, they're going to have their opinion. You can take it or leave it. They can say whatever the heck they want. It's not going to change what I do. And I think that's probably the most important position to be in You do you. Don't let anybody distract you, whether it's intentional or unintentional, because a lot of times the most hurtful and damaging comments can be said with a good heart. They just was out of place.
Positive
or they didn't
intent, even though it was negative.
Yeah.
Positive intent, but you really just tore me down, actually.
Yeah. Great call.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that just, really the point that we're getting to is you can either go for safety and stability, or you can go for freedom. And there's a lot more risk in the path of freedom. I will take the path of freedom any day, as I'm sure you can attest to now, Ryan, instead of going down that quote unquote safe corporate path, which, as we're finding out through this pandemic, is actually not the safest path. I told you, or I don't know if I told you, but March was my best month ever with course sales. And it was right through the middle of the pandemic. Like, how many people in the corporate world can say, I had the best month in March? Like, no one. So
not many, that's for sure.
There's a lot more risk, but there's also a lot more reward in the entrepreneurial path.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah, man, that's great. So didn't mean to trail us off there, but positive attitude and then continual improvement. Number 5 is big. And then you mentioned too, being okay with change. That is key. That is absolutely key. And I think as web designers, my audience is going to be used to this from the get-go, just because technology changes so fast. Web design actually changes faster than any other industry. So that's a big thing. Always be learning that kind of stuff. That's huge. But this kind of leads into something you touched on earlier, which is point number 6, mindset. So you talked a little bit about this, but one thing I liked what you said when you messaged me was you talked about how mindset can actually help with the sales, like the sales aspect of things. Because as we all know, whether you're selling real estate or whether you're selling websites, it's so, like, most web designers hate sales because they feel salesy. But you found out, as I did, I'll back you up in this, that depending on your mindset and how you come across, it actually eliminates the feeling of salesy. So what did that look like to you?
No, that's exactly it. I mean, you have to, number one, convince yourself in your own mind that you are doing your clients a disservice if you don't get them to commit to whatever you're doing. If you're selling a product, if you're selling a service, you are literally doing them a disservice because you offer the best product or service out there. So convince yourself. And guess what? If you can't convince yourself, that's an internal issue, right? That means you need to change your service. You need to change your product so that you have confidence with your product or service. But yeah, that's what makes a huge difference, and also gives the authentic feel to your customer or client, right? Yeah. They can look you in the eye and see that you're authentic and see that you're going to help them more than so-and-so, or your service is better than blank and blank. And that will eliminate the salesy approach that most entrepreneurs dread, that conversation where you sound salesy.
And clients are going to figure that out. Like, people are going to read you, whether, like you said an important term there, look you in the eye. They're going to look at you and they're going to decide, okay, does he or she really like trust their offering, their product or service, or are they just blowing smoke, or are they not really confident? Like, and this goes back to what I talked about in my early days, that I wasn't the best designer, but I cared. And if I did not have an answer to a question, I always let my clients know. I'll figure it out. Like I'll work with you, and I'll talk with somebody who can help out in this area, and then we'll make sure we get it done. And I found that even above the expertise side of things, the care in my eyes, that's what really pushed. I mean, it's one of the most important things for people early in their game is, you're not going to have maybe the best product or service yet, but you can have a really good product or service, and that can be enough as long as people see that you care and that you're confident in your abilities. And let's be honest, a website might take on average 2 months per se. Mm-hmm. Think about how much you can learn in 2 months. Like, there's no reason that when you sell a job, by the end of that project, you can't have learned a lot of the things that you said you were going to look into. And this is where courses and other trainings come into play. This is why, like, if you're not feeling comfortable from a web design perspective in the process of web design, that's why I built my process course. So somebody just left me a review yesterday that said, I now have the confidence to start, plan, build, and finish projects confidently. And I'm like, That was it. That's exactly why I built the course. So it was like the best reward. And same idea, like whatever, anything that you can grow in and learn about that will help you in the sales aspect. So again,
Yes.
we're talking about stuff that is before getting clients, which is why it's so ironic that people just want to get clients. Well, if you want to get clients, every point we've gone over is what you need to start out with.
Yep.
Yeah. So the mindset is huge. And yeah, I totally agree. Like if you're confident in your services, I think having that mindset, what you just talked about, which is if they don't have my services, they're going to be, like it's a disservice. That's a great way to put it. And there's probably ways you could say that in a meeting. It's like, I guess thinking back to it, I unintentionally said things like, like right now, there's probably a lot of customers that are slipping by your website because it's just not as professionally designed, or your personality as a business or whatever is not coming through. Like we really, you don't want to go longer without having your personality on there. And I didn't even think about this, but those are absolutely terms that helped convert my, people I was meeting with to clients who are still clients to this day. So that's great, man. Number 6, mindset. And just for everybody's reference, I'll have these linked below with a little detail so you can recap these. And number 7, I like this. You talked about sinking the ship, which is a term I've heard in different scenarios, but why don't you talk about that and what that means to you and what that means to everyone as entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So no matter where you're at in the journey, you have either gone through it or you are going to go through it, meaning you can always look back, right? Where there's safe ground behind me. I can go back to that full-time salaried job that I had with Victoria's Secret and Bath and Body Works. And if I keep doing that, I'm leaving myself an out, right? So that I can go back. It's actually inhibiting my success as an entrepreneur. So you have to sink the ship, meaning commit to the process, commit to entrepreneurship, and then you can succeed. So if I was a soldier, if you were a soldier in an army and you sailed across the ocean and you landed on another continent and you landed on that enemy's territory, and then I was your commander and I said, Josh, sink the ship, burn the boat. If you sink that ship and you burn the boat, you can't get home. There's no retreating. You now mentally know that if you don't go crush the army that's in front of you, if you don't conquer that army, you're going to die. You are not going to survive. Your motivation just went through the roof, didn't it? There's no way home except forward. Right? So that's what you have to do as an entrepreneur is sink your ship. Know that you have to move forward and commit to moving forward. You can't retreat anymore.
And I'm no history buff, but I do believe that that was an actual tactic by a lot of Greek armies and stuff, to where they would literally either they would drop the army off and just leave, or they would, literally burn the ships. And it was like, you boys better move forward or you're going to die, or you're going to surrender.
Life or death.
Yeah.
Life or death.
And, it makes me think of, I've had family in the earlier days, for the most part, say like, well, do you have a plan B? Do you really want to focus on a plan B? But here's the problem. And look, I'm a realist. I understand the risks that you take when you start an entrepreneurial journey. And the reason I'm liking talking to you about this right now, Ryan, is because you went through your breaking point again when you had a family. It's not like you were a single dude living with your parents in their basement where, you don't get some clients, whatever. I think that actually helped you, as painful as those few months. I guarantee that's what helped you get much more success faster. And the reason I say that is that a lot of people will put focus on like the escape plan, like you're talking about. But just as you said, your focus is going to be divided. Like if you give a half-assed job to what you're doing, but you're really secretly like building out your plan B, then inevitably it's just not going to work. You're going to go back to your safety net. You're going to go back to that corporate job or whatever, because as the analogy says, you didn't burn that ship. It was
you're comfortable with the past. You know you're going to be okay with the past, but in the future it's unknown.
Good point.
Yep.
But man, how awesome. This is where it's like, it's important to have vision too, because you want to make sure that you don't have a mindset of scarcity but of plenty. And real estate's the same way, but definitely in the web design world, I tell students all the time, the sky is the limit. Like there are millions and millions and millions of companies who want to have a nice website or a nice web design person. And the cool thing is you don't need millions of clients. As a web designer, you can get a dozen clients and you'll be pretty well set. And then once you get a couple dozen clients, then you're really well set. And then it can spiral from there. So having that vision is huge too, because I think some people bottleneck themselves into feeling like there's not enough opportunity or that things are going to stop. And that's huge. So great point number 7, man, that, you just don't focus on that plan B, just go for it and put all your efforts into that. It's going to make you succeed in one form or another, and it'll be awesome. And then finally, you talked about the idea of and this is a big one. I like this because I've dealt with this in some ways with both of my businesses, but it's the idea and the quote that people say well, if you build it, they'll come. But as you found out, and as I found out, that is not exactly true. So what would you say to that for the people who have that mindset of you build it, they're going to come, and then you're going to make money overnight?
Let me save everyone the lesson, which is if you build it, they will not come. That's what it should say. That's the honest truth. As an entrepreneur, we think, if I'm the subject matter expert and I build this great process or plan, they are going to come. People are going to find me. It's not true. You have to build something great, yes, but you have to feed it. You have to feed that thing. So you can't just build it. And that's the key part, is don't think that if you build it, they will come, because it just won't happen. Instead, you need to figure out how to get people there, or what is your ideal audience? What's their thought process? Where can you find them? What are they looking for? And then you build something, but you first have a way to get them there. You have to feed your business.
Wow. What a great, and I was going to say, what a great point. It's true in every industry, but there may be no better practical example than websites, because a lot of people build websites and then it's where's all my traffic? Where no one's coming to my website. The website looks great, but why aren't people coming to it? This is one thing I tell my clients all the time, is that the website build is just phase 1. That's not even half the battle. The rest of it is exactly what you're talking about, is feeding that. And in the case of web design, it's SEO, it's building content, it's social media strategies and other marketing strategies to actually get people to go to the site. And then it's providing free content, going back to the give before you get, providing ebooks or information or articles or things that are actually helping people. And it's absolutely, totally true. And it's funny because it blows my mind that so many people have this mentality, particularly in web design, for clients who they're okay, I want to invest $1,000 in a website, and then they just expect that $1,000 investment to just pay off, hundreds of thousands of dollars over time for them. It's not the way it works. It's the start. It's the base. It's the foundation, but you got to build off it. And what you said was key. You got to feed it. You can't just build it. You got to feed it. And I experienced that primarily with joshhall.co. It's why I set the foundation. I built a really nice site that is still holding strong to this day, 2.5 years later. But I didn't just build a site with some courses and a couple articles. I've been feeding it consistently since day one. And that, my friends, is the key to success. That's the key to SEO. Even in the realtor world, if you're any realtors are curious, you can't just build the site and expect people to find you. You have to provide content. You have to feed that thing.
It's just like a dentist, right? They go to school for years and years and years. They get their dentistry license. They find their location that they're going to open up. They put their sign up, and then they can just sit there and wait for someone to come in. No one's going to come. Right. No one will come. You have to have a process in place to drive business there. Don't be a dentist, right? Because they always think that they don't have to do the sales piece. I open the doors and people come. No, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's a huge point, man. Huge point, particularly for web designers, because most web designers don't view themselves as marketers. But here you go. Here's the lesson of the day. If you own your own business, you are in sales and you are in marketing, whether you like it or not. If you don't want to do sales and marketing, then you might as well stick to a corporate position, or in the web design world, you might as well be just a developer or a designer. Because if you are going to own your own business, I talk about this in my business course too. The aspect of designing websites and developing and the coding and all those things, that's less than half of the battle. The rest of it is sales, marketing, innovation, everything that we've talked about. You are the salesman or the sales gal. So really, and I don't want that to be daunting. I want that to be freeing, because again, everything that we've talked about will help with sales, will help with this situation. So man, that's great. 'Cause,
I do apologize. My personal assistant is saying that we have a emergency, so I'm going to have to wrap it up here in the next few minutes, if that's okay.
No problem at all, man. I actually didn't ask you about time before we got started, so that was my bad. Yeah, I tell you what, man, I'll recap these. So let's just end. Do you have a parting thought for anyone? Because these 8 points have been gold, man.
Man, you can do it. Whoever's listening to this, whoever's watching this, you absolutely can do it. I am not a overly smart person. Josh is not an overly smart person. What we did was massive action. We changed our mindset. We gave before we expected to get something. And we understood that if you build it, they will not come. You have to feed the beast. So have a plan in place. Stay positive. Find resources like joshhall.co and plug in, because you will be successful if you latch on to other people's success and positive individuals.
Woo! Well said, man. Ryan, this has been great, dude. You got me pumped up. I'm like fired up after this. So hope this really helps a lot of people who've listened. Thanks for your time, man. Hopefully the emergency is not too bad. And congrats on your first few years of success, man, getting past that breaking point.
Thank you so much, buddy. Have a wonderful day.
You too, man. Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.